I'm Jesse Ventura. Stay vigilant, question more. Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride. The world according to Jesse. Today, we discuss the outcome of Israel's latest election and the foreign nation's influence in American universities. That's right, sit tight. The show starts now. The world according to Jesse.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has won re-election again, despite being the subject of 3 ongoing corruption cases. This is his 4th consecutive term as the country's leader and 5th term total since 1996. U.S. President Donald Trump played a hand in helping Netanyahu get re-elected, first by recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and second by recognizing Israel's authority over the disputed Golan Heights, something no U.S. president has done before. And on the flip side, President Trump uses his close relationship with Netanyahu to gain support from his own Republican base. Why isn't this considered foreign meddling?
It is foreign meddling. This is us interfering in another election. You know, I stated last week on the show how the Carnegie Mellon Institute did a huge study, and from 1948 to 2010, not even counting coups d'etats, the United States interfered in 81 elections in 45 different countries. Well, now we got a 10-year gap where we don't know, so you can bet it's up to triple digits over 100. This is absolutely stuff we do to influence foreign elections. And yet, if somebody tries it with us or pulls an ad in a United States election, we cry foul. I'll tell you what, it is just utterly ridiculous how the United States can sit and cry foul when they do it all the time, and they've been doing it for years and years. The hypocrisy is astounding.
Jesse, what did you think about Netanyahu winning this election? Did you think it was going to happen?
Well, I didn't know whether it would or not, but I'll tell you this, how I feel, Brigitte. Term limits. Every country needs term limits, because if you allow someone to be in charge for over 10 to 15 years, you can just about take it to the bank. Corruption's going to happen, and things are going to take place leading towards dictatorship and fascism. We need term limits. If you notice, when Jesse Ventura runs, I did 1 term as a mayor. Then I went back to the private sector. I did 1 term as governor. Then I went back to the private sector. I certainly could have been reelected over and over again, like the career politicians do. But we've got to stop this. No one, I mean no one, should be able to serve over 10 to 12 years. That's long enough. Over a decade is long enough.
The U.S. and Israel have had a cozy relationship since the Cold War, when the U.S. began viewing Israel as a buffer against Soviet influence in the Middle East. Since World War II, Israel has been the largest recipient of American foreign assistance, receiving over $134 billion in U.S. aid and missile defense funding. Israel also enjoys diplomatic favors from the U.S. At least half of all United Nations Security Council vetoes by the U.S. have blocked resolutions that were critical of Israel. American foreign policy should arguably center on advancing American interests. But since the Six-Day War of 1967, America's Middle East policy has centered on making Israel happy, even at its own expense. Why do you think it is that the United States adopts policies that jeopardize its own security, for example, abandoning the Iran nuclear deal, just to advance the interests of Israel? Is this because the power of the Israel lobby is so great in America?
Exactly, Brigitte. That's hitting the nail right on the head. Their power is so great, and it's also another thing. If you criticize Israel, and if you criticize the government policy, now let me state the government policy, which has nothing to do with religion, what's the first thing that happens? You're labeled anti-Semitic. Now, there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, and I agree with that. I'll tell you something, Brigitte. I would make the best president of the United States. You want to know why? Because I'm an atheist. So therefore, I show no favoritism to one religion over another. I put them all equally. I don't believe in any of them. So therefore, that's the type of people that need to be in office. I can't emphasize how important it is to separate church and state. And when you criticize state, it doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic and criticizing the church.
All right, we regularly hear claims that colleges turn students into liberals by indoctrinating young minds with liberal ideology and shunning conservatism. While you may occasionally see liberal professors and students protesting against right-wing speakers, especially in liberal states like California, there are also incredibly powerful conservative forces behind the scenes, like the Israel lobby, influencing how students and faculty at colleges across America should behave. Now, before we dive in, let's first talk about free speech in higher education. Public colleges receive government funding at either the state or federal level, so of course they are legally required to grant students and faculty the right to freely debate ideas. Still, both liberals and conservatives claim that their First Amendment rights are being violated on public campuses. So what's with all the idea policing at universities today? Don't people go to college to learn how to think critically? How can they do that if they're only exposed to one perspective?
You're exactly right. I'll give you an example. When I came out of office, Brigida, I was the independent. I was the hot commodity. I had colleges and universities lining up to hear me speak, and it lasted for about 1 year. And then all of a sudden, it completely dried up, and I have not been invited to speak at a college, I bet you now, for well over a decade, even longer than that. It's been that long. Why? Because when I spoke at colleges and universities, I speak out against the Democrats and the Republicans. I speak out against a system that I think is hugely corrupt, what we have in the United States today. And you notice they put the stranglehold on me. I haven't been invited to speak at a college, like I said, for well over 10 years. So it's being controlled, and you're absolutely correct. That is not the place where control should be. Colleges and universities should be open-minded to all ideas. That's what they're there for. They're not there to carry the bucket for one government or one particular idea.
Recent news out of several California colleges highlights exactly how much influence the pro-Israel groups have on American universities. Pro-Israel legal organizations, for example, including the Lawfare Project, have repeatedly taken criminal and punitive actions against students, faculty, and staff for making scholarly statements that are critical of the Israeli government and falsely equating it to anti-Semitism. In 2011, members of UC Berkeley's Zionist student organization accused another campus organization, called Students for Justice in Palestine, of threatening and endangering the safety of UC Berkeley's Jewish students. The judge in the case stated that the plaintiffs presented no proof to support their argument and eventually dismissed the case. But that same year, 10 Muslim students from the University of California, Irvine and UC Riverside were convicted of 2 misdemeanors for nonviolently protesting a 2010 speech at UC Irvine by Israel's then U.S. Ambassador Michael Oren. Orange County is one of the most conservative counties in California, and the prosecution said the students acted as censors, blocking out the flow of ideas and infringing on the rights of those who came to hear Oren speak. So there's not an equal opportunity to dissent on both sides. Now, there are too many other cases to list, but the point is, the Israel lobby is not just influencing American politics. It is also greatly influencing other aspects of American life. Jesse, of course, yes, anti-Semitism does exist, and it is absolutely terrible. But that does not mean that we can't fairly criticize the Israel lobby's influence in America, especially when it's getting in the way of Americans' own interests, like free speech on campus.
That's exactly right, Brigida, and it's what I talked about. You know, real anti-Semitism is what happened at Chabad Synagogue in Poway, California this past weekend, where a man shot up a Jewish place of worship based on ethnic, religious hate. That is anti-Semitism. Dissent against the government policies of Israel is not. Why is it you're not allowed to criticize the Israeli government? That's the state. And there's supposed to be a separation between church and state. Just because you criticize a position the Israeli government takes does not mean you're anti-Semitic. Jesse Ventura may criticize them for doing something. It doesn't make me anti-Semitic. I have many Jewish friends in the world, and I've had them for decades and years and years and years. As I said, I'm an atheist. I look at all religion the same. I'm an equal opportunity, non-religious person. I judge people by who they are, not what they believe in their spiritual ideas. And that's what we need in government. Why do you think it was so important that they stressed there has to be a separation of church and state? And let me just fire one out here to Vice President Mike Pence, who says he's such a devout Christian. I would ask you, Mr. Vice President, down on our southwestern border, is that what Jesus would do?
The Trump administration has also considered banning the international boycott, divest, and sanction movement in American universities at the behest of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, better known as AIPAC. Undermining the BDS movement is the Israel lobby's highest priority, and it's taken extensive measures in Congress and even introduced legislation. Now, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act of 2016 was reintroduced this March. The American Civil Liberties Union says that legislation is unconstitutional because it aims to limit free speech that's protected by the First Amendment. If the bill passes, the Department of Education will be required to adopt the State Department's definition of anti-Semitism. When the bill was first introduced, the LA Times editorial board stated, quote, "This legislation is really not about anti-Semitism, but about Israel. It endorses an expansive definition of anti-Semitism adopted by the State Department as a benchmark for diplomats. The problem with the definition is that it unfairly conflates anti-Israel speech with anti-Semitic speech in a way that, if enforced, would violate the free speech rights of students and professors. Give me your personal definition of anti-Semitism versus your definition of legitimate criticism of the government."
Well, it's very simple. Israel is a government. When they make a government decision, it doesn't have anything to do with their religious beliefs, or it shouldn't. Again, I go back to separation of church and state. And Israel's problem is they're not separating it, they're bringing it together. They're making it so that if you criticize them for anything they do, they label you an anti-Semite. That's ridiculous. Especially to someone like me, as I've said before, I treat all religions equally. They don't have a great deal of meaning to me, any one of them, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Christian, whether you're whatever. Jesse Ventura sees government as a place for government, not a place for your personal religious beliefs. And when you start bringing those personal religious beliefs into government, that means you're going to oppress someone who doesn't believe religiously like you do. How many wars ultimately are the result of religions fighting each other? All of them. Every war on this planet is somehow religiously based. And I'll make this statement. I don't believe man and religion can ultimately coexist. One will destroy the other, or the other must destroy the other in which to survive.
It's time for a quick break. When we return, Jesse sits down with a lawyer who represents a Palestinian professor at San Francisco State University for more on Israel's growing influence in American academia. We'll be right back.
The world according to Jesse.
This is the kind of card that has America talking. With it, people with Medicare are getting all-in-one coverage for their doctor visits, hospital care, prescription drugs, and more. This kind of insurance, called Medicare Part C, may also cover dental care, eyeglasses, hearing aids, fitness programs, vitamins, even healthy meals and rides to the doctor. With this kind of coverage, you do not need a Medicare supplement insurance plan. You will access your benefits through your Medicare Part C plan for one low and oftentimes $0 monthly plan premium. You deserve to get the most from your Medicare benefits. Call now for free information that may help you get more coverage for less money. There is no obligation to enroll. Whether for yourself or someone you love, call the number on the screen now. Call now.
I can't believe they charged me this much. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Go to CashNetUSA.com now. If approved, you may get the money you need as soon as tomorrow.
Thanks. Who are you?
I'm CashNetUSA.com. Man.
Apply now at CashNetUSA.com.
Money's on the way with CashNet USA.
I'm Holland Cook. I invite you to climb with me above the mainstream media mire, and from that higher vantage to glimpse the big picture. Question more.
I think the average viewer, just after watching a couple of segments, understands that we're telling stories that our critics can't tell. And you know why? Because their advertisers won't let them. In order to create change, you have to be honest. You have to tell the truth. RT's able to do that. Every story is built on going after the backstory to what's really happening out there to the American public. What's happening when a corporation makes a pharmaceutical that kills people? When a company in the environmental business ends up polluting a river that causes cancer and other illnesses, they put all the health risk, all the dangers out to the American public. Those are stories that we tell every week, and you know what? They're working.
I'm Jesse Ventura. Stay digit, question more. Welcome to my world. Come along for the ride. The world according to Jesse. A Palestinian professor at San Francisco State University has filed a discrimination lawsuit against the school and several of its top administrators. Her lawyer, Ben Garagazli, joins me now to break down the details of the lawsuit and talk about Israel's growing influence in American colleges. Ben, thank you for joining us. First of all, your client is the director of San Francisco State's Arab and Muslim Ethnic Studies program, known as AHMED. What is her name and exactly why is she suing the university?
It's a pleasure to be here, Jesse, and thank you very much for having me here. My client's name is Professor Rabab Abdelhadi, and she is a world-renowned international scholar. She has done incredibly amazing work on the issue of justice in Palestine, and her critiques of Israel are very, very interesting. Now, the reason why she is suing SFSU is because they are doing everything they can on behalf of the Israel lobby to silence her and her advocacy for justice in Palestine, and obviously her critique of Israel. So specifically what is happening is that they have broken every single promise they made to her when they aggressively recruited her about 15 years ago. I mean, this is a person who has very impressive qualifications, including a PhD from Yale. After they recruited her, the 2008 recession hit, and the university realized in a pretty explicit way that if they wanted to get donations that they really needed from these organizations, they were going to have to persecute Professor Abdelhadi, including revoking travel authorization, preventing her from getting 2 faculty positions that would assist her, in other words, 2 professors who would be assisting her, and preventing her from running her own program, as well as essentially
what is the
launching a crusade against her.
Okay, what is the connection between wealthy university donors and Zionist organizations?
Well, these are individuals who represent the elite of the Bay Area. And it's important to distinguish between these individuals and individuals elsewhere that represent the Israel lobby here in the United States. So, for example, in Texas, if you criticize Israel, you are defamed as someone who hates Jesus Christ. In the Bay Area, on the other hand, given the difference, the demographics of who is representing the Israel lobby, if you criticize Israel, you are labeled an anti-Semite. Now, these are organizations that will fund a wide array of different organizations that will try to do everything they can to suppress and intimidate individuals who advocate for Palestine and criticize Israel. You have Canary Mission, for example, that if they find out that you're speaking too loudly against Israel, they'll plaster your name on a website and call you an anti-Semite and a terrorist supporter. I mean, this is pretty serious stuff. People can get into a lot of trouble for this, especially because this stuff is not true in the first place.
Now, how are donors using monetary incentives to influence policies, courses, and university actions and all that? Are the universities simply kowtowing because of the money?
Essentially, yes. President Wong of the university in 2012, when he first arrived at the university, he was incredibly supportive of Professor Abdelhadi and the Ahmed program. He then is taken to an all-expenses-paid trip by the Israel lobby to Israel. He comes back and he understands, hey, if I want these donations, I need to do what the Israel lobby tells me to do, and that includes persecuting Professor Abdelhadi, essentially engaging in this crusade against her, where every time she wants to staple two pieces of paper together, it's like she's got to go to the DMV. Everything turns into a bureaucratic nightmare for her. They're persecuting her in the only way they know how, specifically because they know that they can't fire her because she's tenured, and so they're trying to make her life a living hell so that she just leaves on her own. And quite frankly, they mess with the wrong person, because if you've met Professor Abdelhadi, you will know that she is one tough individual.
Now, what is the Lawfare Project, and how does it factor into this lawsuit?
The Lawfare Project is an organization that has admitted that their goal is to inflict massive punishments against critics of Israel and to make those individuals pay. They sued Professor Abdelhadi back in 2017, essentially because they didn't like her politics. My co-counsel and I, Mark Kleiman, got that case thrown out back in October of 2018. And so these are people who are trying to weaponize anti-Semitism. They're ignoring real anti-Semitism, and they're defaming critics of Israel as anti-Semites and trying to compare them to Nazis. And this is not anything new in our history. We have to remember that law has always been misused as a weapon to suppress people who want to make valid claims against the government. I mean, these people, I am confident, are going to be remembered in the same way as those who supported the Jim Crow laws in the South.
Now, do students in the Ahmed Ethnic Studies program also experience discrimination or Islamophobia? What about Muslim and Palestinian students at other colleges? Is this going on nationwide, basically?
Absolutely. In fact, the president of SFSU has admitted to this. He's admitted that these students have been singled out for punishment. I mean, and this is a huge problem across the nation. I mean, you have Kenneth Marcus from the Department of Justice, who's been weaponizing these bogus civil rights cases in an effort to, again, suppress criticism of Israel. And the double standard at this campus is very, very telling. You had an actual Nazi, and I'm talking about someone who had a swastika tattooed on him, register for Professor Abdelhadi's class. These organizations said essentially nothing, or at least nothing that I've heard of, condemning this. That's how ridiculous this definition of anti-Semitism is, where criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. They care about people who are promoting human rights for Palestinians, but they don't seem to care when there's an actual Nazi on campus.
Now, here's the question I want to know, because this has bugged me for a long time. Talk about the difference between anti-Semitism and simply speaking out against Israel. Why, if you criticize Israel at all, are you then immediately called an anti-Semite? This is politics. This is government. What? We're supposed to rubber stamp everything Israel wants, otherwise you're an anti-Semite? They get anything, otherwise they label you?
Exactly right. I mean, this is an issue that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has been going through. I mean, we've seen it in the news plenty in the last several weeks. And we know that this is intentional. In fact, members of the Israeli government have admitted to this. There is an interview where a former member of Israel's parliament has admitted that this is a trick that the Israel government uses to suppress advocacy for Palestinian rights and criticism of Israel. I mean, the notion that these organizations speak for all Jewish people is as incorrect as the notion that ISIS speaks for all Muslims. It's not true. There are many Jewish people who criticize Israel. My co-counsel, Mark Kleiman, is one of them. And to say that every single Jewish person supports Zionism, I mean, that's just ridiculous. It's outrageous, and it's actually dangerously not true.
Now, the California Faculty Association is a union for professors. Have they reacted to the lawsuit?
They have. James Martell, the president of the union, has supported Dr. Abdelhadi in her claims out of concerns of freedom of expression and First Amendment protections.
Now, if you win, what do you hope will improve in San Francisco and across the country?
Well, across the country is a good point. I mean, this is happening all across the United States. There's a trend to muzzle students and faculty who want to criticize Israel, which is their First Amendment right. And we want to send a message that those individuals should not be afraid of their bosses just because they want to criticize Israel. It's their right to do it. It's an American right to do it. And no one should stand in the way of that.
Good luck on that one. Anyway, Ben, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining me today. And I would like to have you back as this progresses on. I'd like to talk to you again. And especially if at the end of this, if you prevail, I'd love to get you back on to talk about it. Thank you, Ben.
That would be great. Thank you for having me.
The world according to Jesse.
Thanks for watching. Send us your comments on social media for a chance to be featured in next week's episode when we cover more stories ignored by the corporate media.
And remember, when the government lies, the truth becomes a traitor. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of traitors out there in the United States today. Stay vigilant. The world according to Jesse.